Alhamdulillahi Rabbil Alameen wa salatu wa salamu ala ashrafil anbiya'i wal mursaleen nabiyyina Muhammadi wa ala alihi wa sahbihi ajma'een. Amma ba'du, assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh, and welcome to another episode of Ayyuh al-Walad, the second or third rather episode. And it is the second piece of counsel, the second piece of advice that Imam Ghazali rahimahullah ta'ala has given to his student. And we discussed the first one at great length. As I mentioned then as well, and I'll mention now, is that the first few are quite short, and then we move on to more detailed ones as we progress along. So let's take up this next counsel. As you should be now getting used to, he starts with the comment with Ayyuh al-Walad at all times. Ayyuh al-Walad means, or son, or dear child. Even though we know that this individual was not a child as such, that this person was in their 40s most likely, but it's a term of endearment in some ways, but also to kind of establish the sort of social order between Imam Ghazali being the elder and the student being the junior. أيها الولد من جملة ما نصح به رسول الله صلى الله عليه وسلم أمته. So he says, oh my dear child, يعني أيها الولد من جملة. Jumla means that which is inclusive, or that which comprises. Jumla yani that which gather, is within that. We find within that ma nasaha bihi, that which the Prophet ﷺ gave nasiha, advice, may the salutations and peace be upon him, his ummah, is found in his statement. Meaning that if you want to try to gather all of the Prophet ﷺ's view, his statements, his understanding, okay, and you wanted to gather it together in one word, in one sentence. People say, I know the hadith are too much for me, Mufti Sahib. How am I supposed to learn every single hadith? Isn't there something which could just bring together, distill together all the advice of the Prophet ﷺ? And many of us, me included, would struggle to find a single narration that could just bring everything together and give you the message that the Prophet ﷺ was leaving behind. How do you do that? How do you gather? We know that Imam Ahmad ibn Hanbal knew several 100,000 hadith. We know that Imam Bukhari rahimahullah went through numerous ahadith just to distill his 7,000 odd that he collated in his Sahih al-Bukhari. And we can say that for the other A'immah of hadith as well. So how do you bring together, a number which could easily be around 1 million narrations, and try to distill all that and leave one message? Well, Imam Ghazali just does that. Okay, he just does that. So he takes this statement and he says, take this hadith of the Prophet ﷺ, and in this hadith of the Prophet ﷺ, you will find the kernel of the advice that he leaves his ummah. So he says, min jumlati ma nasaha bihi Rasulullah sallallahu alayhi wasallam ummatahu qawluhu alayhi salatu wasalam. So here comes the statement. Alamatul i'radillahi ta'ala anil abdi ishtighaluhu bima la ya'nihi. Okay. So a sign, we always look for signs, don't we? We want a sign. How do I know I'm on the right path? You're not going to know you're on the right path. You're not going to know if you're going to be successful until you reach the end goal. So we don't know if we're going to be successful in the journey that we're on. We don't know if we're going to be successful in the path that we've taken. Is this path leading us to Jannah? Is this path leading us to Jahannam? We don't know that, because we'll only know that when we die. And when we die, we will know that, okay, yes, we are going to Jannah, or we are going to Jahannam. So min jumlati ma nasaha bihi Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam ummatuhu qawluhu alayhi salatu wasalam alamatul i'radillahi ta'ala anil abdi, the sign of i'rad. This is the i'rad means to kind of turn away, okay, or not showing any interest in that human. The disconnect, the ignoring of Allah from a servant. Okay, there's a sign. because we go by signs. You know, when you go to the doctor and you aren't well, then for him or her to diagnose you, you will talk about your symptoms. And these are signs. You know, you could take your pulse, they could take your blood pressure, they could take your temperature, they could ask you, you know, where does it hurt? What are you feeling? So these are signs. This will not tell you what the illness is. The pulse doesn't tell you what the illness is. Okay, that doesn't tell you what the illness is. Similarly, the temperature doesn't tell you what the illness is. The blood pressure doesn't tell you what the illness is. These are just signs. Okay, then it is the expertise of the general practitioner, the GP, who takes all these signs into consideration and then comes to a diagnosis. It can be right, it can be wrong. Okay, a prognosis, as they say. In the case here, the Prophet ﷺ is actually the doctor, and he is telling us if we display certain symptoms, then this is going to be the result. So let's just let's see what the symptoms are. So he says a sign, the symptom of Allah's disengagement with you, or with a person rather, is ishtighaluhu bima la ya'nihi, is his preoccupation, meaning the individual's preoccupation with something which does not concern him, does not benefit him. Okay. وَإِنْ امْرَئٍ ذهبت ساعة من أمره في غير ما خلق له من العبادة. That a person, okay, a person in which ذهبت ساعة, sa'atun can be a moment, sa'atun can be a unit of time. So we can use this as an hour, let's just say. That an hour, or you know, or half an hour, whatever, it's just a unit of time. That an hour passes him by in his age, okay, and he is occupied in something, غَيْرِ مَا خُلِقَ لَهُ, other than that in which he was created for, min al-ibadah, from the form of worship. Meaning that, how do you know when you're being ignored, or how do you know when Allah's withdrawn from you? How do you know when Allah's let you to your devices and is not taking any interest in you? How do you know that? What's the sign? What's the symptom? The symptom is that you are preoccupied in things which you were not created for in the form of worship. لَجَدِيرٌ أَن تَتُولَ عَلَيْهِ حَسْرَتُهُ. And this should be a kind of sound for him that this is lengthened upon him, this affliction is lengthened upon him. So he could spend years in this preoccupation, which is other than that which is a benefit to him. وَمَنْ جَاوَزَ الْأَرْبَعِينَ وَلَمْ يَغْلِبْ خَيْرُهُ عَلَى شَرِّهِ فَلْيَتَجَهَّزْ إِلَى النَّارِ. And as for that person who goes past 40 years old, and وَلَمْ يَغْلِبْ خَيْرُهُ عَلَى شَرِّهِ, and his good deeds or his good behavior or his good actions do not surpass his evil actions, فَلْيَتَجَهَّزْ إِلَى النَّارِ, then he may as well prepare for Jahannam. وَفِي هَذِهِ النَّصِيحَةِ كِفَايَةٌ لِأَهْلِ الْعِلْمِ. In this single piece of advice, in this single counsel, is sufficient for people of knowledge. Is sufficient for people of knowledge. So let's just unpack this for a few minutes, shall we? Imam Ghazali narrates a narration in which the Prophet ﷺ is telling us what a symptom is for a person who is going to head to Jahannam. So if, like I said, we don't know what our end goal is, but we need signs in this world so that we know whether we're on the right path or whether we're on the wrong path. The sign that's being given is alamat, is that you become disengaged and you become disconnected from doing things, okay, which are of benefit to you in terms of acts of worship, like we're doing here now. We're learning, we're studying, we then go to pray Taraweeh. Obviously, we have to eat because we're going to fast. So then that eating becomes an ibadah with the right niyyah, that, Ya Allah, we're eating this, some food. Reason why we're eating this food is we're going to fast tomorrow daytime. So we're going to need the strength. Going to work in the morning. For the man, he makes the niyyah that, oh Allah, I'm going to work in order to earn halal income, in order that I may feed my wife and feed my children. So he has a religious obligation that he's fulfilling. And also then when he returns from work, he goes to the masjid, sits in the masjid, learns something about his deen, applies that into his life, focuses on that. So in this way, this is a person who is preoccupying himself in good things. Some things which are directly related to worship, and some things which are indirectly related to worship, like I explained earlier. And a person should be concerned that half an hour or an hour of his life passes by and he's not preoccupied in something worthwhile to such an extent where he becomes preoccupied in this for long periods of time of his life. Decades could pass before he realizes that where's my life gone? What am I actually doing with my life? And Imam Ghazali draws a line in the sand for an age when we should take reflection. And that age that he brings in is the age of 40 years old. Now, at the age of 40, a person should have reached a stage by now. And remember, this is 40 lunar years, not solar years. So it'll be around 38 years-ish, 38 and a bit years. So when a person reaches 38 and a bit years, if at that stage his good deeds are not outweighing his bad deeds, then, it's a threat here that is given. Then he may as well prepare himself for Jahannam, because that's where he's heading. Because very rarely does a person truly turn or truly change after the age of 40. Now, sometimes people will say, yes, or so-and-so changed, or so-and-so changed. Yes, there's always going to be an exception to the rule. There's always an exception to the rule. What the point is being made here is, generally speaking, that you have formulated your state. Normally by the time you get into your 20s or 30s, you're now trying to improve your good deeds. You're now trying to use your time effectively. You're now trying to increase that so that at least you're moving, I know, unfortunately, societies have changed, but there was a time gone by where men, when they would go through their 20s and approach their 30s, would start to keep a beard. They would go for Hajj as soon as possible and take the laqab of Haji. They would never dream of getting to their late 30s and not have a beard and not have gone for Hajj and not be regularly praying Salah. It was something ingrained within them that they knew that they had to change. And likewise, women would reflect that change. Now, obviously, we're being encouraged, society is encouraging us that, stay young, okay? Stay young. Now, there's nothing wrong with having a young heart and looking after yourself. That's not what's being said. Meaning stay young, but don't, get into a long-term. You don't need to get into a long-term relationship. Don't think you're going to die. Stop having those morbid thoughts. You could live till you're 80. You could live till you're 90 now. So live your life. Enjoy your life. Live it to your full, liberty. Live as according to the way you want to live it. And with these kind of thoughts, you see people pushing death back. In fact, they've pushed everything back. So they'll push marriage back. So before, whilst people were getting married in their early 20s, marriage gets pushed back into their late 30s. Before, people were having children in their mid 20s or early 20s. Now people are having children in their late 30s and late 40s. So you're seeing this pushback. You're seeing this view that, enjoy life. Okay, live your life. And this is exactly a sign. Alamatu iradillahi ta'ala anil abdi ishtighaluhu bima la ya'nihi. He becomes preoccupied in those matters which are of no concern to him, which have no benefit to him. Now, he might enjoy them, okay, but even that enjoyment is short-lived. Because when you actually speak to these people who delay their marriage, when you actually speak to these people who delay having children, when you actually speak, they're not actually happy. They feel they should be happy because this is what society is telling them, that you should become happy as a result of this, but they don't feel happy, okay? They don't feel any better. They just feel that, okay, maybe I should be feeling that. I don't know why I'm not. Because we know that from a fitrat perspective, humans are made to worship Allah. They have been created in such a way that they're always seeking the worship of Allah. They're always seeking to acknowledge the existence of Allah. They're always seeking to, connect to Him in a manner that suits. So this will always be an underlying pull. There'll be this underlying magnet, and people will try to kind of analyze that and understand it in different ways and think that, oh, okay, this is something that I gain from having a good career. They think maybe that's why I feel empty, is I don't have a good career. Some people think, it's because I don't have a partner. That's why I feel empty. Some people say, well, maybe I haven't really discovered myself. Maybe I don't really know who I am. And maybe I need to go on a journey of discovery to find out who I am. Some people think, oh, maybe it's because I don't have any hobbies or something. Maybe I need to have a hobby. Other people think maybe I need to do something, a job that's satisfactory. So we look for all these kind of solutions, but really these are just preoccupations. And if we're preoccupied with these things, then this is a sign that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala has withdrawn from us and allowed us to our devices and allowing us to preoccupy ourselves with things which are not having any benefit to us, but the realization is not coming upon us. But hopefully with the message that we've shared today, that we take stock, we reflect and think, well, okay, am I really pursuing that kind of life? What, excuse me, how am I spending my days? How am I spending my months? How am I spending my hours? Is it when I'm just kind of busy being busy? There's that phrase, isn't it? Busy being busy. Or am I actually, preparing myself for, progressively becoming a better believer and also taking that step? Because whereas, we're all at different stages in our lives, but Imam Ghazali then, when narrating this hadith, mentions the age of 40. That really should be, and as I said to you, 40, this is referring to the lunar calendar, which is about 38 years and a few months. So a person reaches to that stage, if they at this stage, their good deeds, and we're not talking about just being charitable and being decent and being nice. Okay, we're talking about good deeds, because good deeds are determined by Allah, not determined by us. We can't define what a good deed is, because that just means it's down to how our kind of mindset is as to what we determine to be a good deed, or what society perceives to be a good deed. This is not that. Generally speaking, good-minded people and their good deeds and what Allah ordains are good deeds usually are similar. Okay, because we have a human fitra which leads us towards good, but that's not always the case, because determining whether riba is good or bad is not necessarily easy. You cannot intellectually reach that decision. You need revelation to tell you as to whether that's good or bad. So in that way, if at that stage a person hasn't reached that point where first they're thinking about their life, and secondly their good deeds are outweighing their bad deeds now, okay. So, the fight is they're winning the fight, so to speak, but they're not. They're saying the one, if they're not, then the fear, he says, وَمَنْ جَاوَزَ الْأَرْبَعِينَ, that person who goes past that age, وَلَمْ يَغْلِبْ خَيْرُهُ عَلَى شَرِّهِ, and his good is not outweighing his bad. His good is not dominant over his bad. His good is not more than his bad. فَلْيَتَجَهَّزْ إِلَى النَّارِ, then he may as well prepare himself for hellfire. وفي هذه النصيحة كفاية لأهل العلم, and in this nasiha is sufficient for the people of knowledge. Bearing in mind that this first address was to his student Ayyuh al-Walad, who was, as we know, a learned scholar in his own right. But that shows that even the ulama need to be reminded, because they can, in their preoccupations, lose their way, even though they may be doing work of deen, but because it becomes a habit, it becomes habitual, they're not actually connecting with the essence of the act. They're just doing the act superficially. And it's important that they reflect. And some people say, well, ulama are all good people. Ulama are learned people. Doesn't necessarily mean a learned person is a good person, because you can have a donkey that carries many books on its back. Doesn't make the donkey a good donkey, whatever that means. Okay, similarly, a scholar might have lots of books in his head, okay, but it doesn't necessarily make him a good person, because those books have to go from his head to his heart for him to become a good person. So if they are being warned about it, then we even more so should be concerned. That brings us to the end of today's nasiha. Tomorrow's nasiha of Ayyuh al-Walad will be same time, about 20 to 7, inshallah. So join me then. Wa akhiru da'wana and alhamdulillah rabbil alameen. Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh.